to SEC Weekly, Touchdown Alabama's premier SEC news program. I'm here with Ivan White, and my name is Maxwell Taylor. We are writers here at Touchdown Alabama, and today we will go and break down the SEC schedule. Here's our favorite 13 games of the SEC so far, and it might change during the season as we go along, but for now, we'll just start off with Week 1, LSU versus Wisconsin at Reliance Stadium, and I'll pass it to Ivan. What do you think about the keys to this game?
Well, the keys to this game, it's going to be a game that's going to set a standard for the start of the season. Which team is going to start off 1-0? Which team's going to have to start thinking about, oh my gosh, I might be shooting for that 3rd or 4th seed in the college football playoff. And also conference-wise, Wisconsin needs a big momentum win to say, hey, we may be in the Big Ten, but we still beat the heck out of an SEC team. We're not even beat the heck, but still beat an SEC opponent.
And of course, it's going to be against offensive lines. It's because Wisconsin's huge offensive line is going to be having running back Melvin Gordon. We'll see if LSU's defensive coordinator John Chayes can somehow contain him. But moving along to Week 2, we've got Vandy at Ole Miss. This was a big game last year. It showed Jordan Matthews' coming out party to see that he was a true NFL prospect. And we'll see if Carter Samuels can reenact his whole coming out party again against Vandy. It will also show if Vandy or Ole Miss can come out from the bottom of the SEC and start moving into that middle tier area, because they do and have been able to show that they have not been the most decorated SEC programs as of late. But moving on to Week 3 with Tennessee at OU, what do you think about this big game? Because it is Tennessee at Norman, Bob Stoops versus Butch Jones. Moving along to Week 3 is Tennessee at Norman. This seems like it's going to be a big game. It's going to be Butch Jones versus Bob Stoops. Bob Stoops coming off that huge win against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. How can he handle Butch Jones in Norman? Because it seems like Butch Jones needs to show that his program is moving in the right direction.
Butch Jones needs to show that, but he also needs to show that Bob Stoops is wrong about the SEC and all his thoughts about them. You know, Bob Stoops has famously been an SEC hater. He's always said they're not the best conference. He's standing up not only for Tennessee and Knoxville, he's standing up for the entire conference in this game. At Norman, he gave his team the hardest schedule in college football. So he's got to show this year that this team is ready to live up to the hype as the recruiting-wise that they recruited this year. They have an awesome recruiting class this year, and they're probably going to shine this year. At Norman, this is a big game because Oklahoma needs a game to not only get themselves to the Big 12 conference to get their momentum off, but to also ride off that Sugar Bowl momentum they had against Alabama from last year. But we're going to move on to Week 4. Moving on to Week 4, we have Florida at Alabama. Jacob Coker's big first SEC test at home in Tuscaloosa, and in our opinion, the first must-have hot seat game. Matt, so what do you think about this Week 4 matchup?
Of course, this is going to be Jacob Coker's first game against an SEC defense, and he has to show that he is prepared to take over this Alabama offense that has been led by A.J. McCarron for the past 2 years. And he did win 2 titles here, so there is a lot of hype coming in because he's 6'4", because he's mobile, and because he has an arm. And of course, with those cast of wide receivers, Alabama has to show that they're ready to take that next step, not only as a program, but out of the McCarron era to show that there's the next guy up. But in regards to Florida, this is Muschamp's huge game. He has to show that he can beat atop the SEC like he was 2 years ago, to show that last year was just a little bit of a mishap, and Jess Driscoll's injury did slow them down a little bit. But moving on to Jess Driscoll, who I just mentioned, he has to show that he can command an offense, because the offense was extremely stagnant last year. It was just the running game and nothing else. They do have some talent at wide receiver, especially Emory Lane, who just signed. He's a 5-star recruit. So we'll see if he can show out in Tuscaloosa. But moving on to Week 5, we've got Arkansas versus Texas A&M. We've got an asterisk here because it is at Cowboy Stadium, better known as Jerry World. But Ivan, what do you think about this matchup?
This matchup is going to be the first transition for Texas A&M from the Johnny Manziel era to a new era with Kevin Sumlin, the head coach, see what quarterback he's going to pick. Also, Arkansas, this is your chance to find, I would say like a wounded animal. Texas A&M has lost Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans offensively. Their defense was already bad or atrocious last year. So Arkansas, can you upset Texas A&M in Cowboy Stadium, Jerry World, as we said before? But, Maxwell, tell me about the Texas A&M quarterback position. What do you think it's going to be? Who do you think is going to be the starter this year for that?
Well, I do think it will be Kyle Allen. He was the #1 pro-style quarterback in the 2014 recruiting cycle, and it seems like everything that has been said about him has been positive. I think Kevin Sumlin will go into fall camp, and he will see who he's got at the quarterback position, but I think at the end, falling out, Kyle Allen will be the choice. So moving on here for week 6 with LSU at Auburn. This was a big game for Auburn last year. Auburn showed that they can move and run the ball with the SEC's best. John Chavis did struggle a lot in that game. But for Auburn to win this game, they have to ask for Mick Marshall to do more. He cannot just do the right reads in that offense. He has to be able to throw the ball. And with wide receivers like Sandy Coates, I think he can get it done. But moving on with the LSU side of things, it's going to be a weird year with Les Miles. He's got a new quarterback that he has to move in the system. It's either going to be Brandon Harris or Anthony Jennings. Anthony Jennings had a rough, shaky start in his SEC bowl game and against his time in the Arkansas game, where he did win that game, but he seemed a lot of loss in the bowl game. So we'll see what's going on with him. Moving on to week 7, Tennessee at Ole Miss. Ivan, what do you see with this game?
Bo Wallace, can this be his coming out party SEC-wise? Tennessee, for this game, what's going to happen with you? Are you going to be reeling after the OU game? Or are you going to let that momentum that you put up in that game lead you to an SEC, not title, I'm not going that far, but at least from mediocrity to at least a standout team in the SEC. This is at Oxford, though, in Mississippi. You have to make sure, if you're Ole Miss, that you do not let this game be the game that they say, well, that was the game that cost them the whole SEC or cost their whole season momentum-wise. In this game, I picture the Candice boys, both of them, will have big games and show that Ole Miss is for real this year.
It's also going to be a battle against 2 big wide receivers. It's going to be Laquan Treadwell of Ole Miss and Marquez North of Tennessee. We'll see who can put up the bigger numbers. It's a big season for them. But moving on to week 8, we've got Mississippi State at Kentucky. This will be a big game for Mark Stoops, who did kind of just flutter through the SEC while he was doing the recruiting trail. Now, he did pick up some big recruits like Matt Elam, but he has to show that they can get it done in Kentucky, because they can't lose to Louisville in football and in basketball. That's not a good look. But Mississippi State coming out with Dak Prescott as their quarterback, who seemed to really catch on at the end of the year. And it seems like Darius Flowers could be a stalwart on the defensive side of the ball. So, moving on to week 9, which is the big great cocktail party in Jacksonville, Florida. We've got Florida versus Georgia. Ivan, what do you see here?
This is Mark Richt's chance to show that, yes, we've been not mediocre at best this past couple years, but can we also show that we've stepped up? For Gershel, this is the big game for them. Can they show that they are back? Florida side of the ball, this is a little different. Game 2 in the Muschamp Chronicles, I'm going to call it this year.
We're naming it now.
Will Muschamp, this is your hot seat year, and everybody knows it. So, can you show in one of the biggest rivalry games for Florida this year, can you show that you are for real this year and that you are taking this program forward and not backwards, in which direction many of the fan base thinks it's heading?
All right, and moving on to week 10 is a big game. Bama at LSU. This is Bama at Death Valley. The first time since TJ Yeldon's huge screen pass to win the game. Now, a lot of fans were hurt at that game in LSU, and Les Miles knows it. He's going to have something up his sleeve for Nick Saban, because he always does. And after that beatdown in Tuscaloosa, he has to prove anything. On the Alabama side of the ball, Nick Saban has to go in to Death Valley the same way he did in Tuscaloosa. He has to come there with the iron fist. And it seems like LSU might be going through a little bit of rebuilding here with the new quarterback. That's what we said. But we also get to see Jacob Croker 10 games in. His feet is really wet. How good can he be? Can he be a Heisman candidate, like we said before? But not only that, defensively, Trey DePriest has to come to play. There's a lot of really good offensive players on that LSU side of the ball. We've got Leonard Fournette, the #1 running back in the country. Alfred Blue is back. It's going to be a very, very, very tough game. It's going to be hard-nosed like always. Now, moving on to week 11, Auburn at Georgia, the oldest rivalry in the South. Ivan, again, what do you see?
Well, this is the first time they played each other since the famous Pick 6 play last year, or Tipsick, as a lot of people like to call it as well. Auburn at Georgia. Georgia's going to be hungry for revenge between the hedges this year, and Auburn's got to know they are no longer the hunter. They have now become the hunted. Everybody's now looking out for Auburn. They can no longer surprise people. Mark Richt, this would be a huge win to show that the program is heading forward in the right direction. Gus Malzahn, I have a feeling he's going to have some tricks up his sleeve, because that offensive side of the ball, I think, is going to get a lot of hard hits in that game, because, like I said, Georgia is very revenge-minded in this game.
And Jeremy Pruitt, who's now the defensive coordinator at Georgia, has got to get the defensive backfield to not tip the ball, but to just bat it down. No harm done, but we're moving on to week 12 with Mizzou at Tennessee. Again, Butch Jones throws his team in the gauntlet. He's not only going against the SEC, he's going up against a lot of out-of-conference opponents this year that are going to be tough. And he has to show that he's moving in the right direction. But for Mizzou, Matty Mock has to come in and play the man. He's the quarterback now. He doesn't have Jornell Green Beckham, and he doesn't have Damian Washington. He also doesn't even have his tight end from last year. He's got to find his security blanket, and by week 12, he's got to show that not only can he run this offense and keep the game alive, but that he can also win games. And that will be a big, big if for Mizzou this year. Moving on to week 13, either it's the Iron Bowl, it's Auburn in Tuscaloosa against their in-state rival, Alabama. What do you see in this game?
Well, obviously it's the Iron Bowl. It's one of the biggest rivalries in all of college football. And I have a feeling, no pun intended, this game could come down to the last second. But Auburn, like again I said, the hunter has now become the hunted. Bama is mad and angry after what happened last year. After having that loss at Auburn, they went on to even lose the Sugar Bowl, so now they have 2 losses. This game is a statement game for both teams. We don't know. This could have playoff seeding and repercussions for all we know at this point. But Alabama, Jacob Coker, all that matters in Alabama besides national titles is beating Auburn. Can you show that you can do it? Gus Malzahn, can you show that you do have Nick Saban's number and that the University of Auburn, when it has 9+ wins, can keep beating Coach Nick Saban with that record?
And I guess that's been it. This has been a long and winded episode of SEC Weekly. As you can see, the SEC will be huge this year. A lot of big games, a lot of turmoil. We don't have a lot of the same quarterbacks as we did. There's no McCarron, there's no Murray, there's no Manziel. So we'll see how this plays out. But from yours truly and Touchdown Alexander, I'm Maxwell Taylor, along with my co-writer, Ivan White, and our producer, Stephen M. Smith in the back there. We will see you next week.